Hello, this is Surya Saha, and welcome to the Insurtech Story Podcast, the platform to spread knowledge on insurance innovation, digital disruption, and entrepreneurship. Our website, insurtechstory.com, and we are available on Spotify, Apple, and Google. Today, we will discuss on the topic how digital-first approach will define modern insurance in Asia Pacific. And for now, I'm delighted to welcome our guest, Anupam De, who is the head of digital products for Asia Pacific at Zurich Insurance, and he's based in Singapore. He has a strong track record of building and leading multi-million dollar digital businesses. Prior to joining Zurich Insurance, he was at ACO General Insurance, India's first digital non-life insurance unicorn, where he was an early employee and a senior vice president. He comes with rich experience in product and P&L management and in scaling insurtech businesses. He has an MBA from MIT Sloan School of Management and has previously worked with global banks such as Standard Chartered, Barclays, and DBS. So, Anupam, welcome on board, and we are truly excited to have you for the show.
Thank you very much, Surya. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me over.
Thanks so much. Anupam, would you like to tell our audiences a bit on your role at Zurich?
Of course, sure. So I have, of course, joined recently as you mentioned, head of digital products for APAC. My responsibility, amongst multiple others, is essentially to drive the digital initiative for an insurance company which is almost 150 years old, such as Zurich,
Yeah,
in the APAC market, and which includes both D2C business for Zurich as well as multiple partnership-driven businesses that Zurich is looking at in the APAC region. So my remit is essentially to build proposition which is digital first and
right.
launch these in the market and scale them.
Right, great. So I think you guys also have a great presence in the reinsurance segment as well.
Uh, yes and no. In the APAC region, essentially, this is a retail business,
Right.
retail and commercial business. So this is
Mhm.
as a carrier that we do the business more prominently
Right.
compared to the reinsurance part. Of course, I mean, Zurich is it's one of the largest
Yeah.
insurance companies,
Yeah.
and therefore it has different arms, and of course, health, non-life, life,
Mhm.
reinsurance, all of that is definitely part of the overall group.
Yeah. Yeah. So Anupam, to move on to our agenda for the day, and you being like an expert in the field of digital products, particularly for the insurance segment, you know the digital first strategy essentially includes a large component of digital products and tools, be it in any segment, not just insurance. But specific to this sector, how do you see this development coming across among all insurance companies, particularly in the Asia Pacific region? Is it any difference from the other part of the globe?
So let me break that into like two parts, right? I think from a product proposition development perspective, it's actually, if you at a fundamental core level, it's not very different from developing a new product, right?
Right.
But what changes essentially in the digital ecosystem is that you know a lot of times organizations tend to begin from a product first or product centric approach rather than a customer centric approach, right? And I think that's in the insurance space, not necessarily limited only to an APAC region, because I've had the luxury of being in the US and of course in India, and I've seen how a lot of companies are working towards digitalization. And one of the key challenges they face in digital product development is to how use multiple tools to be able to make it more customer centric than product centric. So that's
Right.
really at a core level. That's what I think is the major difference. The other part I think is from a digital product development perspective, it just boils down to a couple of factors. One is, of course, a lot of times, and this is true in insurance as it is true in various other, I think, financial services products, is that companies start thinking about digitalization where they are trying to fit digitalization into their existing business model,
Mhm.
right? Whereas to really reap the benefit of digitalization, I think the key thing for companies is to really rethink or reimagine their business model per se for a digital first ecosystem,
Right.
right? And that I think is at the core of the digital product development part, right? I mean, and I could give you some examples like, a conventional company, when it is
Hmm.
thinking about digitalization, thinks about, let's say, getting a better CRM tool for the call center to make it
Right.
more productive, make it more efficient, right? And it is given, sufficient resources, money, uh, people to, and it's called a digital initiative,
Hmm.
like a lot of places, right? But if you really want to make use of a digital product, then maybe the question is not how to improve the productivity and efficiency of the call center, but can you do away with the call center,
Yeah.
right? And that's where, you know the inverting the business model to imagine a digital first ecosystem comes into play. So I think that's where it is a fundamental difference. The other is, again, the conventional product versus the digital product is that in the conventional product, you think about the product first,
Hmm.
and then you have different functions within the company which will take up marketing, some will take up customer service, right, and the claims part separately. Whereas in the digital product, when we think about it or when we're developing it, it's all packaged together,
Right.
right? Every customer touch point, every interaction that is happening with the customer is part of the digital product. So you have to think end to end for a digital product, which is probably not something that traditionally companies have done very well when they design products, especially in businesses such as insurance.
Yeah. So, you mentioned a very, vital point here. That's the importance of customer experience, which must be at the heart of product development,
Right.
right? So, I think essentially insurance carriers must be little more wiser enough to understand, in order to re-engineer the process from a customer perspective standpoint, as you mentioned. You know, but do you have any, or rather not you in specific, but the insurance companies have any kind of defined development methodologies that work best for the insurance products, or it depends on any sort of a requirement, market to market, what kind of a line of business you're getting into?
So I don't know if there is a, I mean, at least I'm not aware of a standard playbook that insurance companies
Right.
can use, which will work across markets and then across different contexts. But what I believe works definitely is a shift in mindset and being more experimental.
Right.
Right. I
Right.
think the digital tools today give sufficient flexibility and agility to companies where they can test out new propositions, newer experiences for end users
Mhm.
much faster than they would have done in the other, the conventional manner.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
I think as long as insurance companies, or for that matter, any company which is focused and committed to being digital,
Mhm.
is honest about the experimentation part, right, and is
Right.
ready to fail fast and learn and keep tweaking, I think that is probably a playbook that works better than having a standard, framework that would be applicable
Mhm.
across the market.
Right. True. Yeah. So, Anupam, as a following question, can you demonstrate the process of digital product development for the benefit of our listeners? Because this is something, people know, but there's something would be really beneficial to what goes in it.
Right. I think, I mean, of course, like I mentioned earlier, one, of course, we start from a customer first. So I'll come to
Right.
that part, right? And also, let me put it, and take a step back and say that, okay, there are a couple of things that we find which are challenging in typical conventional traditional insurance companies, or for that matter any financial services company. And the digital product development part is a way to kind of is probably a manifestation of how you overcome those challenges, right?
Right.
So if I can put it this way, so and one of the biggest roadblocks or challenges that I think about when it comes to a digital product development part is really that how do you find a mechanism to, you know, build out a new product for which the market is not completely evolved, right? You don't have a complete information and data point about how big the market is, how big the opportunity is, right? And that's where I think the starting small part becomes very, very important. So coming back to the product development part, I think I define it more in terms of a framework which is essentially using three C's for development, right? One of them is, of course, you begin with the customer, which is, most often organizations, once it becomes successful, and I think this is a classic case where, you know, good is the enemy of great, right?
Right. Yeah.
What is working for you, typically you get drawn into that and you keep building for that, and then you miss out on an entirely new opportunity that comes your way, right? I mean, one of the
Yeah.
examples that I can think of is actually the I mean, not in insurance but in electric vehicle market, right? I mean, why is it that GM or a Ford or any of those larger companies could not do electric vehicles the way Tesla has done, right? Because they had a ready set of customers who were always willing to pay the top dollar for a bigger truck, for a bigger SUV,
Right.
right? Which is more
Yeah.
powerful. So there was no incentive for them at that point in time, or for the longest time, to invest into a less powerful, smaller vehicle which could run on electric, because that wasn't a segment that they believed would work for them, right? So that's, I think, from if you begin from a customer's standpoint, right, that's the sometimes your best customers are probably the one that are standing in the way of innovation for you, right?
Right.
So one of the ways to really find out is to segment the market as much as possible, right? And find smaller cohorts within the market which has a potential to grow into a bigger business, right? And that's really something I would think from a customer first perspective. That's one of the key things that we look at when we are developing a new product, right? It's all about segmentation. It's how about how you identify what is the data that what is the data saying to you, how much you
Mhm.
are able to churn that data or mine the data to get insights from there, which can give you some direction towards what would be a newer or more acceptable product in the market. So that's one.
Yep.
The other piece of the I think the product development cycle is also to actually invest in capabilities, right? When it talk about capabilities, it's also in terms of processes, in terms of systems, which can help you develop those products. Because and again, in my past experiences, I've been in companies where they have really looked at building capabilities first before going and becoming a product centric company, right? Because you have to have that DNA within the organization to be able to invest into technology, invest into tools which would allow you to build and scale those digital products, right?
Right.
And last but not least, I would think, is the culture part, right? And I know it's a little uh, I think I would say it's not a very linear way of looking at it, that how does digital product development link up with culture. But again, it comes back to the fact that if you don't have the right mindset to experiment, to be humble enough to accept failures which will happen, right, then it's very difficult to develop a new product.
Yep. Very
if
true.
if your if your product development life cycle is 90 days, right, your ability to experiment is very little,
Yep.
right? So imagine 90 days if 10 people or 20 people or 100 people have worked on a project, you are so deeply invested in that project that it becomes very difficult to turn back if the metrics are not right, and that becomes a major challenge because that's why you've overcommitted yourself, right? And there is, it's a sunk cost fallacy,
Mm.
right? Because you have already invested in it and you keep pushing to develop that product, but you're not able to get that outcome. So if you, and that's where the culture part or the mindset part comes in, right? Because the skill set you could get, the tools you can get, but unless you have conditioned yourself to believe that you will be agile enough to ship a new feature or a new not exactly a product, because again digital product is such that it's actually a combination of multiple features that build or that make a digital product is not a single package that you
Mm.
buy at one go, right? I mean, what is, I mean, for example, if you're talking about an Uber or an Ola or Amazon, it's not a single product, right? I mean, you can oversimplify and say that you book a cab, right? But there are so many steps that are taken care of when you create that product, and that's all of them are not built on day one. Those are things that get built on one piece at a time, right? And that's pretty much what the rigor is required when you're looking at building out a digital product, well, be it in a ride hailing cab company or at an insurance company.
So, just to add to that, what you said on the culture, I think digital transformation is more to do with the culture of the company rather than technology itself.
I agree.
And how the culture makes the real impact than the implementation of the right technology makes a lot of difference, and leadership plays a big role in it.
Absolutely. I agree.
So I think, and this is something, it's quite even I would say it's a vague awareness that people have, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing exactly, right? That if you don't and it's something culture is, driven top down,
Yeah, yeah.
right? I mean, while uh, a lot of people have misplaced beliefs about how culture gets developed or it gets automatically built, but I think companies have to really invest in building culture, right?
Absolutely.
And in
Yeah.
fact, one of the not famous, but one of the most interesting way of how culture is defined is what I heard from somebody in the US is that culture is how the decision gets made when the CEO is not in the room,
Right.
right? And that's so true, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
if your DNA or if your organizational structure is designed in a manner that one person takes the call, right, where everybody else is skeptical of taking decisions
Right.
and you know unsure of being unsure of failing in a particular experiment, then that culture is not the culture of experimentation. That's not a culture which will lead to innovative product development,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? So
Cool. So Anupam, every digitization efforts comes with its own share of challenges. And particularly when we see from the product development side, what challenges do you see, especially from the sustainability and innovation point, and how do you overcome those roadblocks?
right, I think, yeah, some of these I may have touched already. So
Yeah, I think
I
culture
think
would be one point to add.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I think the other challenge is really, what I was talking about earlier. It's that the small emerging markets don't meet the short-term profitability goals of companies,
Mhm.
right? And that's again, I mean, it's part culture, part financials, part quarterly results that you have to declare,
Right.
right? So it's a question of all of those things, and that is a huge challenge, right? I mean, think of it as a budding senior manager in a large organization. You have a great idea which has a 50% chance of failure,
Mhm.
right? Versus
Right.
somebody who has a not so great idea, which is just to maintain status quo and expand into a newer market, etc. That will definitely give a 20% increase in top line, right? More often than not, in most organizations, the second one will get picked up.
Right.
Right? And that is a, again, it's part culture, part quarterly results, part financials, but that's really is at the essence of the biggest challenge or the roadblock that you face when you're building up innovative product.
True.
Because we want everything laid out, right? And some of sometimes it just is not as crystal clear, right? If somebody says make a business case and we build everything and then we will decide to invest, let's make a 3-year roadmap and a 5-year roadmap. i
Yep.
I'm of the belief that it not does not necessarily work, especially when you're trying to build out digital products.
Yep.
Right now, how do you get organizations to look beyond that? Can they do that? I think that's something that the organizations have to work it out for themselves and see how best they can operate within the framework that they have to operate in. Right.
Right.
The I mean, one way to overcome this challenge is really to create teams and invest in a manner which is proportionate to the market opportunity. So, for example, if you're looking at something which is only going to give you 5% incremental revenue, then just dedicate 5% of people and resources into building that,
Right.
right? Don't have it as a, you don't have to put 20% of your manpower to build that, because that will never get signed off. And don't keep it at zero, because then otherwise you will never see that 5%. If it ever grows into 50%, you will
Mhm.
miss out on that opportunity,
Right.
right? So you scale the resources and the people and investment that you make proportionate to the market opportunity that you're, a new market that you're getting into. So that's one part. Uh, the other factor, I think that's, again, I mean, I know I'm probably talking more about culture and organizational structures than products, but what I think is that a lot of organizations, or most organizations, are designed to grow and execute.
Mhm.
They are not designed to fail and learn,
Right.
right? So that, again, is a challenge for building a case for a new product development, right? I
Mhm.
think if I mean, I probably I'm reiterating the point that it's not as much as the tools and the skill sets, but it is a lot about how you think about new product development, how you think about your end consumer, how you think about creating that narrative which would have a newer segment or a new product inside that you're using and trying it out in the market,
Yep.
right? The third part, I think that's probably both linked to a challenge as well as a way to overcome it, is the especially that's true for, I think, insurance companies, is that there is an over dependence on intermediaries,
Right.
right? And that could be a challenge at times, because if your business is so dependent on the intermediaries and you are wary of losing that business by antagonizing that channel, then your ability to experiment and innovate is limited to the whims and fancies of the intermediary,
Yep.
right? And you see that happen so many times, right? Especially when there is a large bank assurance partner or a major broker channel that is involved. So you don't want to, touch that channel or make too many changes in the channel with because of the fear that you might end up antagonizing that channel, right? I think organizations, especially if you're committed to making a digital uh, product which is going to serve the end user, which is the end customer, then you have to definitely find ways in which you are serving the end customer first, and everything works backward from the customer. So it's what we call as the customer backward journey, right? To begin with the customer, and then you unpack the different layers which are involved. Sometimes you may have to circumvent the intermediary, but that's part of the process, because if you don't, somebody else will tomorrow, and then your business model gets questioned,
Right.
right? So I think those are, I mean, that I can think of in terms of creating digital products. What is it that goes into
Yeah, you
you know,
mentioned
into
about
that process?
intermediaries there. So I think,
Right.
distribution for insurance itself is a big challenge. And uh, at least I would really like to think that technology down the line would be able to solve a lot of, you know, I mean, blockages in this distribution aspect. Do you agree? Any thoughts on that?
So I completely subscribe to that. That technology is going to at least break those barriers that are created, I think, artificially to some extent. And of course, in
Right.
some markets, it was important also, right? I mean, if you look at it, especially markets where there is low insurance penetration, the distributors play a massive role
Hmm.
in terms of educating. And I say that educating in quotes because it happens both ways, right? That education
Right.
is to a large extent also a self-serving goal, right? So so from that perspective, I think distributors play a key role. But if the distributor's role is magnified to an extent that your business model hinges on the distributor's network, then there is a challenge,
True. True.
right? I think that's sometimes gets glossed over because it's something that's seen as there is an over dependence on the intermediary. But I do think that especially when the digital ecosystem uh, going direct to consumer, right? You can have omni channels. So I don't think there is a. I'm not necessarily questioning whether an intermediary should exist or not.
Hmm.
But I think the important point is that the eye should always be on the consumer rather than trying to make a larger group of intermediaries happy because you're dependent on them for the distribution part.
Yeah. I think, yeah, one very, important point you mentioned about the markets that has low penetration. So I think Southeast Asia is one of the biggest example for that. And I think, distribution must get, remodernized with the help of technology.
Correct. Absolutely, I agree. I think technology, and especially you've seen, markets like, of course, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, all markets, while they
Yeah.
have low insurance penetration, but the access to internet, having internet on the go on their mobile phones, has made a significant difference in terms of how products get experienced, not just for insurance, but for various other, for financial inclusion, financial services products, and digital banks have been doing a fantastic job in the
Yeah.
region, right? So I think there is definitely a strong case for reaching directly to the consumers through digital channels and scaling them.
Right. Yeah. So Anupam, the last point to discuss for today, would you like to let us, or rather just give us some thoughts on some trends that you're seeing in the digital product innovation side in insurance that can potentially fuel the growth in Asia Pacific region? Like, for example, any sort of a new product area that you're looking at, or any existing enhancement of a product, or any different ways of looking at, like, we are looking at micro products, sachet products, and so on and so forth.
Right. So when you talk about actually APAC, I think APAC is a market which has very varying economies, right? So it's kind of difficult to paint entire APAC with the
Yeah.
same brush.
Yeah.
Uh, but broadly, I would classify them as markets which have matured insurance
Hmm.
ecosystems and industries. Countries like Japan, Korea, Singapore, Australia, right? And there are emerging economies like Indonesia, India, Malaysia, etc., where the penetration is lower, the per capita income is lower, and the opportunities are kind of very different from what the opportunities that exist in the developed markets, right?
Right.
So And interestingly, actually, both of them have. My personal belief is that both of them offer unique opportunities in their own ways. For
Right.
example, in emerging markets, like we mentioned, like we discussed a while back, the digitization has been pretty quick, right, across multiple industries and consumer segments. And there, I think an embedded insurance product
Yeah.
has a far greater role to play than the traditional insurance product. So yes, I do believe that there will be a lot of micro insurance products that are offered through, let's say, a fintech or an e-commerce company or a travel online travel company, right? So those are the ones which I think will be the key distributors, if I can call them,
Mhm.
of insurance products in these markets, right?
Right.
There will of course be opportunities for direct to consumer as well. In but I think the growth and innovation, I believe, to a large extent, would happen in the embedded insurance category for the emerging markets,
Right.
right? Because it'll be a volume driven game, but it'll also not be a game where one player gets everything,
Yeah.
right? Because there are that ecosystem is so fragmented, and there are so many pathways to reach the end user that it's a question of what is the innovation that you're doing and the value that the customer is seeing in your product,
True. Yeah,
right?
I think it's a very well segmented thought there. I mean, the emerging markets and the developed ones where penetration is quite matured. I think it would certainly differ how insurance is seen and what the trends would look like.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
mean, and mature markets offer their own opportunities, right?
true.
I mean, for example, products like cyber insurance, right? I think emerging markets are a little way off, and I could be completely off, okay, on this, but my sense is
Right.
that because not because they are not aware of the risks, but I think the market has not reached that maturity where people are willing to pay money for some of those things, right? Whereas a mature market, a cyber insurance product or an identity theft product is probably something which is uh, more acceptable,
Yeah.
right? Because people are aware of the basic insurance is taken care of. Now you want to enhance protection. You want to reach that, the next level of covering yourself for risks that are evolving at this point in time.
Yeah.
Right. Similarly, with like pet insurance is huge in the US and in Europe,
Yeah.
right? It's so something like that. I think in mature markets, even within APAC, is likely to
Yeah.
take
In
off.
in India, it has already started. There are
Good,
many startups that has come up. Has it's in the it was in news certainly from the funding part that they
correct,
have gained. But yeah, it's going to pick up.
correct. No, absolutely. I believe that's a good opportunity. And the other piece is, the electric vehicle market has not exploded. I use There is no pun intended in this particular talk here. Has not exploded,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Has not exploded in this in the APAC region as much yet, right?
Right.
And I think the electric vehicle space going forward is going to get very very interesting when it comes to motor insurance, because the
True.
amount of data that you can get from these vehicles, because telematics is
Yeah. Yeah.
still very rarely used use case in APAC region, right?
True.
And electric vehicles give you tons and tons of data, which can change significantly the underwriting process and how the risk is underwritten going forward for vehicles, right? Like usage based insurance, pay as you drive insurance, etc., will have a completely different flavor and texture going forward because of the data that you can get from electric vehicles. Right?
Yeah.
So that's another area I think, especially in mature markets,
Mhm.
that's something which should be an interesting one.
I think it's interesting time for the industry now, and it's a wait and watch, see how technology will continue to disrupt. Great thoughts, Anupam. Thank you so much. Fantastic discussion, and thank you for your time today. It was a truly delight to have you as your guest.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity. Enjoyed having this conversation.
And lastly, to wrap this up, thank you for listening and see you at our next episode. Take care and stay safe. Goodbye for now.